He thought it was just a fox in the road, the simplest explanation his mind could offer on a night when the mountain highway had stopped looking like a road and started looking like a suggestion carved through endless white. The painted lines were buried, the shoulder erased, the sky flattened into one cold shade of winter, and snow no longer fell from above but moved sideways in violent sheets, driven by wind that sounded like it was scraping the world clean, yet inside the snowplow cab, everything felt controlled and contained, warm air pushing steadily from the heater vents, amber lights glowing across the dashboard, windshield wipers carving temporary clarity before the storm swallowed it again, the low rumble of the plow blade vibrating through the steering column into his palms. Steady and familiar, and he had driven this route so many times he could feel the curves before he saw them, knew where crosswinds hit hardest, where ice formed first, where culverts hid beneath the asphalt like quiet mouths under snow. And tonight he wasn't thinking about meaning or symbols or anything larger than the task in front of him. He was thinking about finishing the route, about clearing the stretch before dawn, about getting home, until his headlights caught something that didn't belong. At first, only a darker smudge in swirling white, barely noticeable. But it didn't bend or scatter. Like blowing snow, it held its place, and he eased off the gas, automatically, leaning forward as if proximity could turn confusion into clarity, and the shape sharpened into a fox cub, small and thin, red fur dulled by frost, snow clinging to its back and tail, darker tips on its ears, a faint white patch at its chest that flickered in the light, standing in the center of the lane as if the blizzard didn't exist, and it didn't bolt or freeze in panic, it simply stared, and he had seen animals in headlights before. Deer locked in stunned brightness, coyotes sprinting across without looking back, rabbits darting in chaos, but this was none of that. The cub took a few slow steps forward, stopped, turned its head toward the roadside drift, looked back at him, forward, pause, look back, wait, the sequence repeating with deliberate rhythm as if motion itself were a language. And his first instinct was irritation because storm nights were already long and visibility was trash and he didn't need an animal delaying him. He could inch forward and let the presence of the plow push it off the road like they always did, but the cub didn't move, it held its ground, and watched him as if it had been waiting for these exact headlights. And something uneasy crawled up his spine, and he shifted the plow into park and turned off the engine, and silence fell heavy inside the cab. Without the Mechanica. Hum, the storm sounded louder, wind slapping snow against the windshield like handfuls of sand, and for a moment he stayed seated with his hands on the wheel, telling himself this was unnecessary. It was just a fox. But outside, the cub moved toward the shoulder, stopped again, and looked back, waiting. And he opened the door and cold air punched into the cab, stealing warmth instantly, snow swirling around his boots, wind tugging at his jacket as if to drag him back inside. And he stepped down onto the frozen road, and the world became louder and harsher than it had seemed through glass, and the cub trotted ahead slowly, never too far, pausing every few steps to check if he was still coming, and he followed with boots sinking into deep powder that blurred his footprints almost immediately as the wind tried to erase them, and the cub led him to a curved drift beside the road, a smooth mound that didn't look natural, and he recognized the shape beneath it.
Hold still, I've got you.
A drainage culvert.
Something's not right.
A metal tunnel.
Look out! It's collapsing!
Usually harmless.
It's blocking the way! We have to move!
And the cub scratched the drift once, twice, then stepped back and stared at him as if the answer were obvious. and he crouched and brushed snow aside with his gloved hands. The drift, hard and compacted, layered by pressure and time, no longer powder but something almost structural, and he cleared a narrow gap and saw darkness beneath. T first, only shadow, then movement. A quick flicker deeper inside, like fur shifting in the dark. Gone, and then there again. Two tiny shapes pressed together inside the tunnel, and behind them, larger and still a mother fox, her fur crusted with frost, ice clinging to her whiskers, her body curled tightly around the kits, her chest rising and falling too slowly, too shallowly. Snow having collapsed from above and narrowed the entrance into a trap so that the storm wasn't
Gotta
just
get back to the
outside
plow!
closing in, and the cub
Come on,
stood
push through!
beside him, silent and steady, watching his face like he could read decisions. And in that moment, understanding hit him hard enough to make his stomach drop. This cub hadn't wandered into the road by accident, it had stepped into danger on purpose. It had stood in front of a moving machine in a blizzard to make him stop. Out of all the headlights that could have come down this highway tonight, it had chosen his, and he straightened slowly as wind pushed at his shoulders, and he knew he could leave, could call for help, could tell himself wildlife services would handle it at daylight. But daylight was hours away, and inside the tunnel the smallest kit trembled faintly, and then trembled less, and he knew that sign because sometimes when shaking stops, it doesn't mean
All
the
right,
cold
time to
is
clear the
gone.
snow again.
It means the body is losing, and he looked at the cub again.
There, that's better. The
and
truck
it
blocks the
didn't beg
gusts.
or whine. It simply waited as if it had already decided the story could end differently if only the human would move. And he turned back toward the truck, and the cub followed close, not running ahead now, but walking beside him like a shadow, as if the decision had already been made. And the shovel handle felt colder than the air when his gloves closed around it and he slammed the truck door and moved back toward the culvert, leaning into the wind.
Hey,
And the
Kit,
cub
you look
was
cozy in that
already
blanket.
there, waiting by the drift, like a guide
warm in
that had
here.
rehearsed
Wanna come
this
inside?
in his head. Snow clinging to its fur in tiny crystals, its eyes locked on the opening he had exposed, and then flicking up to him. And he crouched and drove the shovel
Easy
into the
now,
packed
little one.
drift with a
I've got
dull
you.
thud, because the
There we
snow
go.
didn't
You're
break
safe
like
with me.
powder, but resisted like layered
Let's
clay.
get you warm.
And he stomped a boot against the blade to force it deeper, lifted a heavy chunk and threw it aside, the wind catching loose snow midair and hurling it back into his face. But he didn't stop, thud, pull, throw, again and again, widening the entrance by inches, because inches mattered. Because he could see the tunnel more clearly now, dark and narrow, with the mother's red coat barely visible behind the kits, and the cub shifting closer then back again.
Easy now, Mother
Restless
Foxby. I've got
and
ya.
tense and
You're safe
vibrating
with
with
me.
urgency. And he worked
get you warm
faster
now.
for a few seconds, anger flashing at the storm itself, until a harsh gust slammed down the embankment, and the drift shifted with a soft crack and settling. Sound and snow slid inward, partially sealing the opening again. And his stomach dropped, and he froze, shovel, held midair, listening to the groan of compressed snow above the culvert. Not just snow, but weight and pressure, and a roof that, if it collapsed completely,
Good to have the family together
would
again.
seal the tunnel and bury the mother and kits behind smooth white silence no one would ever know had hidden life. And he lowered the shovel and forced himself to breathe, because speed would kill this, and control was what mattered. And he changed angles, carving the drift, the way you carve a doorway, widening the top first,
All right,
shaping
time
a
to head
shallow
out.
arch, so pressure would distribute
Beautiful
instead
out
of
here
dropping
today.
straight down, slicing small and lifting small and clearing small and repeating. And the cub edged forward and stopped at his knee, its presence grounding him, not because it helped physically, but because it reminded him why he was out here. And inside the tunnel, one kit trembled in rapid shivers, and then the trembling slowed, and that was worse. And he leaned closer, shining his light into the culvert, and the mother's eyes were open now, not wide or wild, but awake in the way a creature becomes when it knows something is changing and it has no power over it. And he dug again, slower and more precise, snow stinging his cheeks and forcing itself into his hood. And collar his breathing thin in the cold air, and every exhale fogging instantly until the opening looked big enough for his arm. And he hesitated, because once he reached inside, there would be no clean reset, and if the mother panicked or the drift collapsed, or he lost his footing, this could go wrong fast. But the kits were not getting warmer on their own, and he slipped his arm into the culvert carefully, and the cold inside felt different, trapped and stale and unmoving, and his glove brushed fur soft and too thin, and he felt ribs under fur alarmingly sharp, and he curled his hand beneath the first kit's chest and lifted, and the mother's head jerked forward slightly, ears flattening, mouth parting just a fraction, in warning not attack. And he froze and lowered his shoulders, making his posture smaller, calmer, letting her see the kit was supported, not dragged. And the cub stepped closer right beside his leg still, and present, like it was silently telling its mother, "This is the one." And after a long second, the mother didn't move, and then her eyes softened just a fraction. Not trust, not acceptance, but allowance. And he pulled the kit slowly into the wind, and it weighed almost nothing, too light, and his chest tightened, and he tucked it inside his jacket, against his shirt, pressing it to his body heat, and the kit twitched faintly. And that was enough, and he reached back in for the second kit weigh. Ish squirmed slightly, weak movement, but movement, and he lifted it carefully, supporting its belly, and pulled it free and tucked it beside the first. And now only the mother remained, and he leaned in, opening his hand toward her slow palm, up no sudden motion, and she stared at him, eyes calculating, while wind screamed above and the arch creaked under pressure, and a thin stream of snow fell onto his sleeve, and time tightened like a rope. And he didn't know what made the next moment happen, whether it was exhaustion or instinct or the cub's quiet certainty, but the mother shifted forward, not fully just enough, and he slid one arm beneath her chest and the other. Under her belly, her fur icy and stiff, and her body fragile, lighter than it should have been. And he lifted gently, and she resisted faintly, then stopped resisting, and he pulled as snow shifted behind her and the tunnel. Narrowed, scraping her fur, and his heart hammered, and he adjusted his grip, lifting her front end slightly to clear the packed lip of the drift. Another inch, and another, and then she slid free, and immediately the drift above them gave up, and the arch collapsed inward with a heavy, muffled thud, sealing the culvert behind them like a door slammed shut. And for a moment he stared at the smooth slope where the opening had been, because if he had waited even seconds longer, the outcome would have been different. And he didn't fin. Ish, the thought, but turned and pushed through the storm toward the truck. Mother Fox cradled in his arms, two kits tucked inside his jacket, the cub trotting close at his side, and the highway empty around them, just wind and snow, and a decision made real. And he climbed into the truck and slammed the door, and warm air rushed over frost-stiff fur, and he lowered the mother carefully onto the passenger seat, unzipped his jacket, and pulled the kits out, wrapping them in a thick blanket, and for a moment nothing changed. And then the smallest kit twitched a shallow inhale, then another, and the second pressed closer to warmth. and the mother shifted weakly but automatically, curling her tail around them. And the cub jumped onto the seat beside her, pressing its body against her side. And the heater hummed and snow hammered the windshield. But inside the cab, there was stillness and breath and life. And he thought again.
Hey there, little
that
one.
He had thought
You look cold.
It was just a fox
Here,
in
take
the
this
road,
blanket. It'll keep you warm.
Until he saw the family.
That's it. You're
until
safe
he
with me.
understood the cub hadn't been confused. It had been brave. And knowing the truck was only temporary shelter, he drove slowly toward a dense cluster of pine trees ahead. A low dip where branches broke the wind, and under the canopy the storm sounded different, muted, and he parked. And shut off the engine and carried the mother beneath thick branches, laying a blanket down first, then placing her gently onto it, and bringing the kits one by one, pressing them against her belly, and the smallest lifted its head faintly, and the second tucked closer, and the mother curled around them, tail wrapping tight, while the cub moved to the outer edge of the circle, positioning itself between them, and the open forest guarding even now. And gradually the storm weakened, the roar softening, snow falling in thicker flakes, instead of horizontal streaks, clouds thinning, and something in his chest loosening as he stepped back and watched their breathing steady. And later at dawn he returned just to check, and found them still there, stronger, the mother lifting her head steadily, the cub noticing him first, not defensive, not aggressive, just aware. And he didn't step closer because he didn't need to, and he saw tracks leading deeper into the forest, small paw prints, uneven and energetic, the cubs slightly ahead still leading, and within moments they moved into the trees, red fur blending into shadow. And they were gone, and he remained standing long after they disappeared, because the highway looked the same, and the trees looked the same, and the storm had erased its own evidence, and that unsettled him more than the storm ever had. Because storms are obvious, but near loss can be silent, hidden under smooth surfaces, seconds away from invisibility. And he had almost driven past, and that truth stayed with him long after winter melted, and grass returned, and the culvert became visible again, ordinary and functional, but layered with memory. And he understood that the biggest moment in that story hadn't been the digging or the collapse, or even the rescue, but the second before he shifted into park, that quiet internal hesitation when the voice said, "You don't have time. It's probably nothing. Keep moving." And that voice had almost won, until a small red shape stood in his headlights and waited. And from then on, whenever something small appeared on the road, he looked twice, because sometimes the smallest life is asking the biggest question: are you going to pass by, or are you going to stop? And that night had answered it for him.